Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the heroin and prescription drug epidemic that is tearing families apart and devastating communities in every single one of the states represented here in this chamber. And I rise today for the 10th time since this body, the Senate, passed CARA, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, by a vote of 94-1. It took us 2.5 weeks on the floor to get that done. It took 3 years of work to put together the right legislation to build that consensus, but we got it done. We proceeded over time to pass 18 separate bills dealing with this issue, and now we're in conference with the House. As I have said in every speech that I have given over the last 10 weeks we've been in session since that time, we need to move, and move quickly, and there's no excuse for inaction. And I'm going to continue to come to this floor and talk to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, leadership on both sides of the Capitol about this issue to get it done. Why? Because this is an emergency. This is not just another issue that Congress should take up. This is one that is affecting every single community in America. And sadly, it's getting worse, not better. Every week when I come to the floor, unfortunately, I come with new news. I come with information that has come to my attention since my previous talk on the floor about what's happening in our communities. And I'll do that again today. There is some good news, and that is since I spoke on the floor last week, the Senate Appropriations Committee has voted to increase funding to deal with this opiate issue. This is, again, heroin, prescription drugs, this new fentanyl, which is a synthetic form of heroin that's gripping our communities. And the funding increase was just made as a commitment by the Senate Appropriations Committee on a bipartisan basis to have a 93% increase in funding as compared to this year. This year was also an increase in funding. Thanks to the leadership of some of the members in this body, we increased the funding for this year. We've increased it again for next year. That's the good news. But we got to be sure the money is properly spent. And that's what CARA is about. It's an authorization bill. It says that going forward, let's be sure we're spending it on evidence-based treatment and recovery that actually works to make a difference, to get people back on track. Let's be sure we're spending it on the kinds of things that keep people from getting into the funnel of addiction in the first place. Again, evidence-based prevention and education. And let's be sure we're helping our law enforcement and helping our health officials. The reason the Fraternal Order of Police strongly supports this legislation is it helps them in training on how to use naloxone and Narcan more effectively and provides them the ability to have that, to be able to take these overdose increases we've seen in all of our states and be able to save lives. So this legislation is comprehensive. It's needed. We now have the funding in place. Should there be more funding? Yes, I think so. But this is an awfully good start to have a 93% increase, and again, an increase already for this year. There is no excuse for us not getting this conference committee completed, taking the comprehensive Senate bill, merging it with the individual House bills, and getting it to the President's desk for his signature. The comprehensive approach is the only way to do this. The acting U.S. Attorney for Northern Ohio said it well. Her name is Carol Rendon. She said, the only way we can stem this tide, and she's involved with it, folks, she's there in the trenches, the only way we can stem this tide is with a comprehensive approach. I couldn't agree more. A lot of us, including my friends and allies on the outside who are interested in this issue. By the way, 130 of the national groups have supported this legislation, 130 groups, virtually every group in the country involved in prevention, education, treatment, recovery, law enforcement has supported this. But they're concerned about the House versions, the 18 separate bills versus the comprehensive bill, because the House versions do not deal effectively with this issue of recovery. So treatment and recovery need to go hand in hand. And by the way, without recovery, the legislation is not comprehensive. It's called the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act for a reason. We know that funding the right kinds of recovery programs will work to help people get back on track, bring their families back together, and keep them away from some of the aspects that we all know about. Number one cause of death now, accidental death in the state of Ohio, is overdoses. Probably it's number one cause of accidental death in the country from the data that we've received recently. We got to be sure that recovery works. CARA offers critical resources to develop recovery support services for individuals, for families working to overcome addiction. One thing it does, by the way, is it promotes these recovery programs at high schools and colleges. Sadly, that's needed. At The Ohio State University, we happen to have a model recovery program. Sarah Nerod, who's a brave young woman, started this. It's something that other schools are now emulating. It started with a couple people, now it's grown and grown at Ohio State, where recovering addicts can come together and talk among themselves in a support group. These are college students. This is something that's been very helpful at the college and high school level because it's needed. There are some good ideas also in the 18 bills passed by the House that were not in CARA, and we should incorporate those. One I like particularly is lifting the cap on Suboxone so we can expand the number of patients who can be treated by a doctor for an opioid dependency. Suboxone, like methadone, is one of the treatment methods that's used. That cap should be raised. There seems to be a bipartisan consensus about that. I'm hopeful we can quickly resolve the differences we have between the House and Senate bill, pick up the good parts of the House bill, keep it comprehensive, and get to the President to his desk for signature. I'm encouraged that the conference is getting going. I thanked Senator McConnell, Majority Leader, last week for naming the conferees on the Senate side. There's been a lot of good work done already, and now we have the conferees officially named on both sides. Again, no excuse for not moving forward. I will tell you that I was very concerned yesterday when I heard a news report from National Public Radio about a White House meeting with some Democratic members of Congress about potentially stalling CARA, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. One White House legislative aide is quoted as saying, quote, "We need to slow down the conference. We need to slow down the conference. Enough so that the White House can bring it back to the American people. We need help in slowing it down," end quote. The piece went on to say that some of the Democratic members who went down to the White House were eager to help, to slow it down. I hope that's not accurate. I can't believe it would be. Delaying might be a good way to score some political points, but it's terrible policy. It's the wrong thing to do. It's a disservice to the millions of families across this country who are suffering from the consequences of addiction and who are waiting for relief. They've been patient so far, but these 130 groups I talked about are getting increasingly impatient, and I don't blame them. I am too. This bill is about saving lives. Delay means the status quo continues. 129 Americans on average are losing their lives every day. Every day. We had 129 families come to the Capitol a few weeks ago to make that point. The CARA family group, to be able to let members know this is something we need to act on and act on now. 5 Ohioans on average every day are losing their lives. That's 1 in every 12 minutes at the national level. In the 103 days since we passed CARA here in this chamber with a 94-1 vote, during those 103 days, this means that 12,000 Americans have lost their lives to overdoses from heroin and prescription drugs. And again, the overdoses don't tell the story. As horrific as that is, it's a much bigger story. It's about all the casualties, people who may not have overdosed and died, but they are casualties. They have been torn apart from their family. They have been torn apart from their work. They have been driven to crime, like theft, to support their habit. They do feel like there's no hope for them. 9 out of 10 people who are addicted are not getting treatment. This is happening right now. The price of delay is that those people are not getting the help they need. The longer we delay, the longer this epidemic continues to get worse. Maybe some of those who want to delay CARA don't realize how urgent this crisis is. I know there's a lot going on right now, and maybe they're distracted by other issues. Maybe they don't know the statistics. Maybe they don't know the stories of the families that are broken up, the lives cut short, or those who are casualties of this. Maybe they don't know the faces behind the statistics. Again, just since last week, when I spoke last time, we have new information that's troubling. We know now that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are warning that the heroin epidemic is actually driving the spread of HIV and hepatitis C, including in my home area of Southwest Ohio. We now know that. So again, this is about heroin and prescription drugs. It's also about Hep C. It's also about HIV. Maybe they don't know about the drug trafficker sentenced last week in Lima, Ohio for trafficking $300,000 worth of heroin and 20,000 injections worth of heroin. Maybe they don't know about Stosh Simzak of Euclid, Ohio, outside Cleveland. He was a star athlete in soccer and in football. He was charismatic, talented, joyful young man. But in high school, he started to experiment with drugs. Started with marijuana, then ecstasy, then prescription painkillers. He got addicted to opioids, then turned to heroin. It's less expensive, it's more available. His relationship with his family suffered, of course, as it almost always does. The drugs become everything. At times, his relationship was broken altogether. He had a hard time getting a job and then keeping a full-time job. Finally, he agreed he needed help. His parents unsuccessfully tried to get him into 5 different rehabilitation centers. Often there's no room. He was arrested with a felony drug charge. He posted bond and he was released. He's told his dad, Steve, in a text message, quote, "I don't want to lose my family. I've lost enough already. I want to be the son you can be proud of if it's not too late." It's the last time he ever heard from his son. Within 48 hours, he had died of an overdose. Maybe those who support DeLay and CARA don't know about Dan Durbin from Delphos, Ohio. It's a small town. He reports setting up on the front lawn for his daughter's high school graduation party recently and seeing in the alley right next door a heroin deal taking place in front of these high school students. I know it's an even-numbered year, meaning it's an election year. There's always another election. But delaying CARA is unacceptable. Partisanship is not going to help people who are suffering to find treatment. It's not going to heal our families. It's not going to educate our kids so they don't become addicted. If we want to show the American people we can accomplish something around here that really makes our communities better, we'll get CARA to the president as soon as possible. We've kept this legislation completely nonpartisan, not just bipartisan. We brought in major experts from around the country. We had 5 conferences over a 3-year period. We gathered ideas from Democrats and Republicans, and anyone who had a good idea, we didn't ask where it came from. We asked if it was a good idea, if it would help to address this problem. That's the way things are supposed to work. We had strong help from the White House. Director of National Drug Control Policy, Michael Botticelli, who has stated repeatedly we need a comprehensive solution, was quoted as saying, "There is clear evidence that a comprehensive response looking at multidimensional aspects of this that are embedded in CARA are tremendously important. We know that we need to do more, and I think all of those components put forward in CARA are critically important to make headway in terms of this epidemic." That's the White House drug czar. I hope the White House staffer who was quoted saying, "Let's delay," actually talks to the drug czar. Nearly every Democrat in this chamber voted in support of CARA, and I commend them for that. Democrats were indispensable in crafting it. They were involved at the very start. Sheldon Whitehouse is the co-author of this legislation with me. He has a real passion for this. He has a heart for it. He understands the pain these families feel who lost a loved one. He understands the casualties of this epidemic. He gets it. Amy Klobuchar, also been very involved in this, along with Kelly Ayotte and our side and others. This has been something that has been from the start, again, not just bipartisan, but nonpartisan. It's been a group effort. That's one reason I think we've received so much good support, because we came up with the right ideas, and these groups around the country who worked with us on that realized it's going to make a difference. I've been involved with this issue of drug abuse and addiction for more than 2 decades. A mom came to my office 22 years ago and said her son had just died of an overdose. What was I doing? That got me engaged. I'm the author of the Drug-Free Communities Act, the Drug-Free Media Campaign, the Drug-Free Workplace Act. Here in this chamber, I've been the author of other legislation, including with Dianne Feinstein, to stop these synthetic drugs, to make sure they're scheduled as illegal drugs. We've tried to help in terms of prescription drug monitoring, passed legislation on interstate prescription drug monitoring. But this legislation, this CARA legislation, is what's needed now. There's no good reason to keep these families who are affected waiting. We can have a conversation about funding. Again, I'm for more funding. I voted that way. But this 93% increase in funding this year, in the next appropriations bill for next year, is a great step forward. Let me just say respectfully, again, this issue is not like everything else we face around here. This is urgent. We've got to move now. Will it solve the problem? No, the problem's not going to be solved from Washington, but Washington can be a better partner in addressing the issue right now, and it's a growing issue. Whether I'm in a suburb, a rural area, or the inner city in Ohio, no matter where I am, I hear from people about this issue. I have a teletown hall tonight. I'll hear about it. A few weeks ago in our teletown hall, a gentleman called in, wanted to talk about the treatment options in CARA. You seem to know a lot about it. I asked him why he knew so much about this, if he wouldn't mind talking about it, reminding him there were 25,000 people probably on the call at that time, that he was being heard by a lot of people, and he told his story, which was unfortunately a story you hear way too commonly in my state of Ohio. His daughter, in and out of treatment, in her case, in and out of the criminal justice system, had decided to seek treatment. She went. She couldn't get in. 14 days later, she died of an overdose. According to one poll, 3 in 10 Ohioans know someone who is struggling with an opioid addiction, family members, friends, coworkers, fellow parishioners, their neighbors. Those family members are hurting too. It's almost unbearable watching a loved one suffer through this disease, and it is a disease, and it requires treatment. Ohioans are taking action, and appropriate action too, and I commend them for that. In Warren, Ohio, the Breaking Point Recovery Center recently held its annual walk against heroin. Nicholas Story and Emily Smith, who are in recovery from addiction, bravely spoke at that rally about their experiences and how this epidemic is affecting them. Nicholas spoke about how much happier he is now that he's in recovery. My life has improved so much, it is amazing, he said. Emily talked about how her mother, some of her cousins and friends have suffered from addiction. Some have died from overdoses. I commend them for having the courage to speak up and to spread awareness about this epidemic. Raymond Sensoda of Euclid, Ohio, also spoke there about losing his son, Josh, to a heroin addiction. He was a star athlete, played point guard, was a 4-man letterman in high school. He was an acolyte at his Catholic parish. He was known for his sense of humor, his artistic talents, had a good job at a rubber company in Middlefield, Ohio, but he became addicted to prescription painkillers, and eventually, like so many others, he switched to the less expensive, more accessible option, which was heroin. He overdosed at the age of 31. Raymond, thank you for speaking up. At Barnesville High School in Barnesville, Ohio, Ohio Health Services, Barnesville Hospital, and Crossroads Counseling Services held a town hall about the heroin epidemic, bringing together doctors, lawyers, law enforcement, public health officials. Judge Frank Fregiato spoke there, and he said, rich, poor, black, white, educated, non-educated, political, non-political, wherever you are, your family is at risk. He's right. That's what we can't afford to delay. Today, I was talking to 2 high school principals who came to see me at our weekly coffee we have in Ohio, and they informed me that they have lost 6 of their recent graduates to this issue, and that they're holding a town hall on this soon at that high school. On Saturday, in Stark County, dozens of motorcyclists participated in the 2nd annual Families Against the Heroin Epidemic Rally in Stark. Families Against the Heroin Epidemic Rally is also Fathers. Fathers is the acronym. These fathers and those who support them raised money for treatment addiction, for treatment, for education, for law enforcement. I want to thank everyone who participated in this motorcycle ride and everyone who's doing their part to stop this epidemic. By the way, that event was founded by Larry and Kara Vogt of Perry Township. Their son's in recovery from a heroin addiction. He's in transitional housing. As Larry puts it, if you aren't affected by this now, you will be. Mr. President, I know the scope of this epidemic can sometimes feel overwhelming, but there is hope. There are many, many stories of people who have found themselves in the funnel of this addiction, the grip of this addiction, and have found hope through treatment and recovery. There are many who are now helping others to get treatment. Michael Evans of Columbus, Ohio is an example of that. He had chronic back pain. He got Percocet and OxyContin. He became addicted. Now he is helping others. He's been clean and sober for more than a year. He's beating it because he got treatment. Again, Mr. President, it's time for us to act. I've told again stories just from the last week of what's happening around the country and in my home state of Ohio. There is no excuse. We need to act quickly to find common ground, to get a comprehensive bill to the President so it can start to help those millions who are struggling. Delay is not an option. I yield back my time.